Achilles was the son of the sea nymph Thetis and Peleus, the king of the Myrmidons. Thetis had initially attracted the attention of both Zeus and Poseidon, who competed for her hand in marriage. However, Prometheus, known for his foresight, warned Zeus of a prophecy that Thetis would bear a son greater than his father, and so, fearing the potential threat, Zeus and Poseidon withdrew their pursuit and arranged for Thetis to marry Peleus instead. According to the myth, when Achilles was born, Thetis attempted to make him immortal by dipping him in the river Styx. However, as she held him by his left heel, that part of his body remained vulnerable. Peleus, seeking the best upbringing for his son, entrusted Achilles to Chiron, the wisest and most just of all centaurs, who resided on Mount Pelion. Chiron raised Achilles and imparted to him a wide array of knowledge, including the arts of medicine and healing. According to Homer, Achilles grew up in Phthia with his childhood companion Patroclus. Homer also writes that Achilles taught Patroclus the skills he had learned from Chiron. Thetis foretold her son's fate. He would either gain glory and die young or live a long, uneventful life in obscurity. Achilles chose the path of glory and decided to take part in the Trojan War. In the account by Dares the Phrygian, Achilles is described as having a large chest, a fine mouth, powerfully formed arms and legs, and his head was covered with long, wavy chestnut-colored hair. He was mild in manner but very fierce in battle, and his face showed the joy of a man richly endowed. This description paints a picture of Achilles as a formidable and strikingly handsome warrior whose presence on the battlefield was as commanding as his legendary skills. Some post-Homeric sources claim that in an attempt to keep Achilles safe from the war, Thetis hid the young man dressed as a princess, or at least a girl, at the court of Lycomedes, king of Skyros. Achilles, properly disguised, lived among Lycomedes' daughters under the name Pyrrha, Circicera, or Asa. During his time at Skyros, Achilles began a relationship with Lycomedes' daughter Deidamia, with whom he fathered two sons, Neoptolemus and Oneirus. According to this story, Odysseus learned from the prophet Calchas that the Achaeans would be unable to capture Troy without Achilles' aid. To find Achilles, Odysseus went to Skyros, disguised as a peddler selling women's clothes and jewelry, and cleverly placed a shield and spear among his goods. When Achilles instantly took up the spear, Odysseus saw through his disguise and convinced him to join the Greek campaign against Troy. Homer's Iliad is the most famous narrative of Achilles' deeds in the Trojan War. The epic begins with Agamemnon, the leader of the Greek forces, having taken a woman named Chryseis as his slave. Her father, Chryses, a priest of Apollo, pleads with Agamemnon to return her, offering a generous ransom, but Agamemnon refuses, prompting Chryses to pray to Apollo for retribution. Apollo responds by sending a devastating plague among the Greek army. The prophet Calchas correctly identifies the cause of the plague, but is hesitant to speak unless assured of protection. Achilles, the mightiest of the Greek warriors, vows to protect Calchas. With this assurance, Calchas declares that the only way to end the plague is to return Chryseis to her father. Agamemnon, though reluctantly, agrees to send Chryseis back. However, he demands that Achilles' slave, Briseis, the daughter of Briseis, be brought to him as compensation for his loss. Achilles, angry at the dishonor of having his plunder and glory taken away, refuses to fight or lead his troops alongside the other Greek forces, urged by his mother Thetis. In his rage over Agamemnon's theft, Achilles prays to Thetis to convince Zeus to help the Trojans gain ground in the war so that he may regain his honor. As a result of Zeus's influence, the battle begins to turn against the Greeks, and noticing the Greek army's dire situation, the wise elder Nestor declares that the Trojans are winning because Agamemnon has angered Achilles. He urges Agamemnon to appease the furious warrior, so Agamemnon agrees to make amends and sends an embassy consisting of Odysseus, Ajax, and Phoenix to Achilles' tent. They promise that if Achilles returns to battle, Agamemnon will return Brus unharmed and offer additional gifts, including treasure and honors. Despite their pleas and the generous offers, Achilles rejects all that Agamemnon proposes. The Trojans, led by Hector, push the Greek army back toward the beaches and assault the Greek ships. With the Greek forces on the verge of absolute destruction, Patroclus, desperate to save his comrades, leads the Myrmidons into battle wearing Achilles' armor, while Achilles himself remains at his camp, still refusing to fight. Patroclus' strategy initially succeeds, and he manages to push the Trojans back from the beaches. However, his success is short-lived, as Hector confronts him and kills him, believing him to be Achilles due to the armor. When Achilles receives the news of Patroclus' death from Antilochus, the son of Nestor, he is overwhelmed with grief and rage over the loss of his beloved companion. His mother, the sea nymph Thetis, comes to comfort him and persuades Hephaestus to forge new armor for Achilles, including the magnificent shield of Achilles, to replace the armor that Hector had taken from Patroclus. Enraged over the death of Patroclus, Achilles ends his refusal to fight and takes the field, killing many men in his rage but always seeking out Hector. Achilles even engages in battle with the river god Scamander, who becomes angry that Achilles is choking his waters with the bodies of the men he has killed. The god tries to drown Achilles, but is stopped by Hera, Athena, and Hephaestus, who intervene on Achilles' behalf. Zeus himself takes note of Achilles' wrath and sends the gods to restrain him so that he will not sack Troy prematurely, showing that the unchecked rage of Achilles can challenge even the dictates of fate. Finally, Achilles finds his prey. He chases Hector around the walls of Troy 3 times before Athena, disguised as Hector's favorite brother Deiphobus, persuades Hector to stop running and face Achilles in battle. Realizing the trick too late, Hector knows the confrontation is unavoidable. Wanting to go down fighting, Hector charges at Achilles with his sword, but misses, and accepting his fate, he begs Achilles not to spare his life, but to treat his body with respect after killing him. Achilles, driven by his overwhelming rage, refuses Hector's plea, declaring that his fury drives him to such extremes that he would hack Hector's flesh and eat it raw for the agonies Hector has caused him. Achilles then kills Hector and drags his body by its heels behind his chariot. Later, Achilles has a dream in which Patroclus begs him to hold his funeral, so he hosts a series of funeral games in honor of his beloved companion. During this time, with the assistance of the god Hermes, Hector's father Priam bravely goes to Achilles' tent to plead for the return of his son's body. Touched by Priam's courage and grief, Achilles relents and agrees to return Hector's body, and also promises a truce for the duration of Hector's funeral. The earliest account of Achilles' death appears in Book 22 of the Iliad, where Hector, with his dying breath, predicts that Paris and Apollo will slay Achilles at the Scaean gates of Troy by shooting him in the heel. Another notable version involves Achilles falling deeply in love with Polyxena, a Trojan princess. Achilles asks Priam for Polyxena's hand in marriage, and Priam agrees, as the marriage would end the war. However, during a private ceremony where Priam oversees the union of Polyxena and Achilles, Paris, hidden in the bushes and not willing to give up Helen if his sister marries Achilles, shoots Achilles with a divine arrow, fatally wounding him. Some later accounts add a further layer to the story, stating that Achilles married the sorceress Medea. According to these tales, after both of their deaths, they were reunited in the Elysian fields of Hades, the final resting place for the heroic and virtuous.